All right, today we're diving into one of the most difficult challenges in mental health, the psychotherapy of chronic schizophrenia. But, to really get a handle on it, we have to start by questioning what we even mean by the word chronic.
Our guide for this journey is the absolutely groundbreaking work of Dr. Silvano Arietti. We're going to be digging into his foundational book to understand how he completely reframed not just the treatment, but the entire idea of what schizophrenia is.
So, let's kick things off with that really basic question. When you hear the word chronic, what comes to mind? Probably something that just lasts a really, really long time, right? But what if that's not the whole story? What if it's not even the most important part?
And this brings us to our first major insight. Dr. Arietti basically said that the way we were thinking about it was all wrong. He came up with a completely different way to define what chronic really means when we're talking about schizophrenia.
So check out this contrast. The common view is pretty simple. Chronic just means you've been sick for a long time, or your symptoms are super severe. But Arietti's view? It shifts the whole focus. For him, it had nothing to do with a calendar or a checklist of severity. It's all about the quality of the symptoms, what's actually happening inside the person's mind.
Arietti called this the second stage. Now, the easiest way to wrap your head around this is to think of it as dream logic versus wake logic. Our everyday thinking right now is wake logic. It's rational, cause and effect. But in this second stage, the mind gets stuck in dream logic, where connections are all symbolic and fluid, and the basic rules of reality just don't apply anymore.
So, if a patient's mind is running on a totally different operating system, you can see the problem immediately, can't you? How is traditional talk therapy supposed to work? How do you bridge that kind of gap? It becomes this massive puzzle for therapists. And this quote from a 1967 study just puts the real-world problem right out there. It's basically saying, hey, even if this super intensive therapy could work, if it takes 5 or 10 years, what's the point? It's just not practical. It might be interesting for a research paper, but it has zero public health value. And the hurdles were just immense. It wasn't just the insane amount of time and money. There was a much deeper problem. How do you form that basic therapeutic connection, that working alliance, when two people's minds are running on completely different logic systems? And the studies confirmed it. You'd see almost no progress, even after 2 full years of therapy.
Okay, so researchers had to get creative. They started thinking, well, if we can't easily change the patient's internal world, what if we change their external one? And this led to a whole new game plan. Let's use social interaction as the therapy itself. A researcher named Arnold Ludwig came up with this 4-step model. A good way to think about it is like trying to wake someone from a very deep sleep. First, you need a loud alarm clock, something real and concrete to get their attention. Second, you have to keep hitting that snooze button so they don't just fall back asleep. Third, you've got to teach them how to set their own alarm. And finally, once they're actually awake and alert, well, what's next? You have to help them figure out what to do.
One of the coolest experiments that came out of this was the buddy system. They paired patients up, and here's the genius part. Your rewards, your privileges, they all depended on how well you and your buddy did together as a team. This simple little rule forced them to interact, to actually be responsible for each other. And you know what? For many of them, it worked. Almost half the patients got a lot better, which proved that even in this deep state, forming a responsible relationship was actually possible.
This whole idea of changing the external world then got taken a step further. Researchers, led by Sanders, started asking a different question. What if we could fight the awful effects of being institutionalized just by totally redesigning the patient's entire physical and social world?
And they really, really went for it. They got rid of those giant impersonal dorms and gave patients private rooms in little cottages. They gave patients their own keys, which is such a simple but powerful symbol of autonomy. They started clubs, social events. They even trained the staff to act like a community, constantly pushing this idea that the goal was to live a life outside the hospital.
But the results? This is where it got fascinating. The approach did not work for everyone. The older, long-term patients, the ones often called burned out, they loved it. They thrived in this new structure. But a lot of the younger patients, the ones with more active symptoms, they actually got worse. All that forced social closeness was just way too overwhelming. And this was a huge discovery. Chronic schizophrenia is not one single thing.
So, after all these different attempts, from intense talk therapy to these big social experiments, what's the final takeaway? What's the sobering reality we've learned from all this?
Well, the biggest takeaway is that there's no silver bullet, no one-size-fits-all cure. The more withdrawn, long-term patients did best with simple, structured methods.
But those same methods could actually be harmful to patients with a more active, symbolic inner world. The one thing that helped pretty much everyone? A positive, supportive community. That was always a good thing.
And that leaves us with this huge, modern challenge. We now know that treatment has to be incredibly personalized. So the question becomes, how in the world do you build a healthcare system that can actually deliver that kind of individual care on a massive scale? That's the question we're still trying to answer today.